Good evening, Vancouver. I think we are live here Monday, March 7th. Canucks After Dark, back once again. I hope you are all doing well. As always, joined by my co-host, Canuck Clay. How are you doing, Clay?
I'm great, Parker. I'm just vibing to this awesome music that you come up with from week to week. I'm doing well. I hope you are well wherever you look sunny. I presume it's sunny where you are.
Well, it's dark. It's 10 p.m.
Okay.
The sun is gone, but it is nice. It is warmer than it is at home, so it is nice to be away for a little bit. But yeah, we've got a couple of good hockey games to talk about, a couple of wins, which will be fun. We've got a bunch of other topics as well, as we usually do. So anything you want to start off with, or should we just get into things?
Let's just get a bit. By the way, how'd you shoot today?
I shot an 89, but wasn't my clubs. I was borrowing some clubs, so it was a little iffy, but it was lovely course.
A McGillney on a course without your clubs that you probably never played before. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I was pretty happy. It was a fun morning, absolutely. So we've got a bunch of stuff to go over. Nothing major, but again, trade deadline is 2 weeks away, so that's going to be a big portion of the show. By the way, shout out to Justin bringing out the $5 super chat earlier because the Oilers sprung another leak tonight, and the Canucks are a better team than Edmonton. He says, the Oilers are struggling. They can't get goaltending and they can't win games. We will touch on that because they are faltering.
Yeah, we see like two other teams to struggle too, but we'll get into that.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll break down the two games this week. Only two because the Canucks played on Wednesday and Saturday. Was that right? Thursday and Saturday, something along those lines. It was only a 2-game week, and they don't play again until Wednesday. But we do have two games to break down. And the first one I didn't watch most of because I was packing, but that was the Canucks taking down the New York Islanders 4-3, a game where they sort of hung on at the end. I was watching the last 10 minutes or so and just like, please don't blow, but it turned out okay. So Clay, I think I'll leave the recap on this one to you.
No problem. Yeah, Vancouver had the control play at least from a shots perspective in the first two periods, but really the game turned in 45 seconds when our two young guns, Niels Höglander and Vasily Podkolzin, scoring 45 seconds apart right at the halfway point of the third. And yeah, it was the Islanders, remember, they smoked us. They absolutely hammered us at the start of February. So it was nice to get this win, especially after losing to the Devils so badly. I'm just looking at some stats. It's crazy. Now I remember the Canucks did not take one single penalty in this game. They did not.
Wow.
Yeah. So Islanders went 0 for 0 for 0, and the Canucks went 0 for 2 on their own. So not the best part, but they only got 2 power play opportunities. So a very disciplined game. I know Islanders fans were screaming bloody murder, especially, I'm not sure you saw the highlights. Hamnick basically tackled a guy, leading to Brad Hunt's goal. And the one thing I will say, and then I love your reaction to this, even if you didn't see the game, all 4 lines were responsible for each of the 4 goals. So that was kind of cool. And yes, Hunt scored 1 unassisted, but that was the Lamical line that was on there. Weren't credited with any points. And otherwise, every single line was on for each of the 4 goals. So it showed me a very, very balanced, disciplined attack. A good game.
Yeah, and I think another thing that sort of stood out from this game, just looking at the stat sheet of it, is ice time, right? Ice time in this game was pretty even, right? You have the top guys getting about 19, the lower guys getting about 12, but everyone was, in that sort of that range, right? A lot of guys at 15 or so, which is good to see, especially in a game where they were losing in the third period, right? Up until basically the 10-minute mark, they come out and get 2 goals late. But they were pressing, right? Second period, the shots were 16-9 in favor of Vancouver. Bunch of goals, right? 2 goals apiece. But yeah, you mentioned the lack of penalties, and that's something the Canucks have been on a bit of a trend on lately, which is good because their penalty kill is not great. So if they can avoid taking penalties for a few days or a few games, and I mean, we look at the Leafs game in a minute, but they only took 2 penalties in that one. There was a game last week. I don't remember who it was against, but there was like 4 penalties against them and none against the Canucks or something like that. The Canucks are doing a really good job of staying out of the box, which is really important when your penalty kill is the worst in the NHL.
Yeah, and Parker Boudreau always says the 2 ways that the Canucks get a better chance of winning is if they take not 2 penalties, but if they're shorthanded 2 times or fewer, and they give up 2 goals or fewer. So that's kind of intuitive, right? Both of them go together. Yeah. But yeah, he's basically saying we have to be moving our feet. We can't be not moving our feet because as soon as you You stop moving, you're hooking, you're slashing, you're holding, and the Canucks have been doing a lot better than like Tyler Myers. When's the last time you saw him take a multi-penalty game? I can't remember.
That's not a very high bar, but it is true. Yeah, I think he had a quote before the Maple Leafs game. He says, "Yeah, if you take 3 penalties against Toronto, you're dead, right? You're going to lose." And that is fair, right? I mean, we're talking about some of the best power plays in the league. And when you're the worst penalty kill in the league, it doesn't have to be the best power play in the league to take you down. But so, yeah, the Canucks take that one 4-3. And I think by most analytic metrics, they were the better team, which is good. You know, the Islanders are a team that has been struggling outside of the playoff race and basically no hope of getting back in because that entire Eastern Conference is basically locked up. But they did have a much harder opponent Saturday night, one that felt like, you know, okay, they got lucky against Toronto. Lucky, I say. Well, they had a great goaltender against Toronto a few weeks back where they scored a couple early and sort of hung on for the remainder of the game. Didn't think that was going to be the case this time. But the problem with Toronto is their goaltending has fallen apart over the last couple of months, especially in Jack Campbell, who still has like an above average save percentage because of that excellent start of the season he had, but he has been so unreliable for them lately. And the Canucks capitalized on that. Demko was great, even allowing 4 goals, but had some amazing, huge saves late. And the Canucks were able to get everything through. Alex Chason scored. That's a terrible sign. But the Canucks were basically able to get everything through Jack Campbell in a game where they were probably outplayed, especially when you take score effects into account in the third period, where the Leafs were just on the gas pedal for the last 10 minutes. But the Canucks put 6 up on the Maple Leafs and hang on for a win.
Oh, yeah, so much to break down here, Parker, and it's very clear that Toronto simply cannot beat Vancouver, at least this season. Were you surprised when you heard that this is our first win in Toronto since 2011?
I was at first, and then I thought about it a bit.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't. It's really not that surprising. Although, especially with last year, right? I mean, they played 4 games there last year. You'd think one of them would go, but I mean, the Canucks were great last year, so it made a little bit of sense.
And we got to give some props to Toronto. Isn't Austin Matthews good?
It's silly. He's so dangerous from everywhere. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's got, you know, he's going to put up 40 his 40th goal already almost. He's going to score 60 this year, and he's probably still not going to win the Hart, in my opinion. At least I don't think he should. But yeah, the Maple Leafs have such a crazy strong offensive team. The problem is their defense isn't working great. And they gave up on Freddie Anderson, who is now a top 3 goalie this year, basically for Carolina, which is, you know, a bit of a flip there. And Jack Campbell, like I said, started phenomenally, but we're talking about a 30-year-old goaltender who's never been a starter really. And it's starting to wear on him, right? He wasn't, he's not used to having to play 60 games in a season, right? So he's fallen off a cliff there.
Yes, yeah, you make a great point though about Toronto's offense. So if we were Toronto Maple Leafs fans and we heard that Matthews scored 2 goals to take over the NHL goal scoring lead, John Tavares broke a long streak, and Robertson scores his first ever regular season goal, you think that's a pretty good night for the Leafs. Some feel good stories there, but our feel good story was our top line: Miller, Boeser, and Pearson creating, forechecking, Besser's bad turnover aside. But what's really funny is they were on the ice for 3 goals, but scoring them. But they only were +1. So that means they're on for at least 2 of the Maple Leafs goals. So that's not great, but they were all over the ice, both good and bad, I guess, and ugly with that turnover.
Yeah. Tanner Pearson is on a bit of a heater right now.
Yes.
You know, I've given him flack in the past, but I think the last month he has actually been playing excellent. He's got quite a few goals lately. That one diving poke check in the last couple of minutes there to break up a play was fantastic. This was a game of just battling, right? I mean, they're up, you know, they score that one late in the first to take a 2-1 lead. And then they fall apart in the second period a little bit. Toronto puts on the pressure. They get a few goals, and now it's 4-3 Toronto going into the intermission. And you're thinking, well, how are the Canucks going to get this one back, right? Toronto has all the momentum. The play is going to be in the Canucks zone for the last period, basically. But they go out and we get a Tanner Pearson goal, basically a minute in, right? Take all the momentum away. It's a tie game. And then Chason scores one to give the Canucks the lead, and then they sit on their heels. and Toronto really ramps it up. And I mean, the shots in the third period, 16-6 for Toronto, but and that Luke Chendeliev game penalty didn't help anything. But The Canucks hang on. They get the Tyler Mott backhand or the Tyler Mott empty netter. Nice pass by Pettersson there. And the Canucks, they do hang on and get go 2-0 against the Maple Leafs this year.
Yes. So I got 3 quick points. I love your reaction to each of those. So I actually messed up the stat. Miller, Boeser, and Pearson ended up as -1. So that means they were on the goal for 2 even strength. Boeser's power play doesn't count. That means they're on the ice for 3 Toronto Maple Leafs goals against. So you don't have to react to that. I just thought that was interesting. Here's one reaction. When was it who scored the when Mott scored the empty netter, did you notice he tried to get out of the zone? Do you think he was, because I always say that he's kind of a puck hog and he always tries to score. Do you think he was trying to score from his own end, or do you think he was actually trying to pass it to Petey to set up a scoring chance?
I think, to me, I wasn't fully paying attention at that point, right? I was taking my notes because the game was about to end. It looked to me like he fired it down sort of like just to get it deep, right? And he knew that he had a guy that was going to beat the icing.
True.
Because I think Pettersson was well ahead of the play, and I think the thought was, instead of trying to force a pass to Pettersson, just play it in deep. Because worst case, it doesn't work out, and the Leafs get the puck back with 20 seconds to go, right?
Right.
And most likely that's good enough, right? At least you're taking some time off the clock. And if it's not going to be icing, they have to skate up ice, and it's going to be 12 seconds by the time they get a chance. So I think it was a smart play, and Pettersson to take the extra second and try not to force it in front of the net.
Yes, great point.
Tyler Mott, coming back with an open shot. I'm surprised Matthews didn't block it. He got close, knowing how well he's playing. It seemed almost inevitable that he'd get a piece of it and go the other way, but no, it was a perfect play. Glad it was Mott who got it. Petey gets a point on it too, which is always nice because I don't think he had another one for the rest of the game. But overall, a solid finish.
Yeah, great point about Petey not forcing it in the middle to Lamico, who's streaking in the front of the empty net, because if that gets blocked now, it's odd man going the other way. So that's a really good point. Last thing I was going to say, Parker, I noticed because I didn't watch this game, I was at my church event, but then when you watch the replay and you watch the highlights over and over, I noticed that the 3 Canucks even strength goals, the first 3, not including Boeser's power play, were all created by the right shot defenseman. Hamnick shoots it, rebound, Miller puts it in. Hamnick shoots it and scores, and then Myers shoots it, and Pearson tips it in. So they come around the net, they work it to the left point, over to the right point. They really like those guys with the right shots pounding it in. I don't know. It's something I noticed, but it's been working for them, and it's great to see. We need offense from our defense, is my point.
Yeah, and the thing that was helpful there was Jack Campbell. I mean, there's the 2 shots that just get slowly tipped 5-hole from the point. The Hamnick one, takes a weird deflection and goes in. It was shots from the point were big, and when you're against a goalie that's struggling, put things on net. It's working. If you're able to beat the goalie a few times early, just keep putting pucks on the net, right? They're not pulling them. They're not putting Mrazek in. So keep firing stuff at the net and hope it works out. And it did, and they needed it to, because like I said, Toronto had a ton of offensive going. I mean, you look at the analytics on this game, right? Like Toronto dominated the expected goals. And again, mostly from that little stretch in the second period and then all of the third period. But again, they have a good goalie, which helps. And they were able to light up the opposition.
Yeah, Demko, 2 massive saves in the last 90 seconds. One on the cross crease to Marner, the other one from Matthews short side. 2 really good saves for sure.
So all of that, Canucks get 2 wins this week. They're 6 games above 500, 5 games above 500. What does that take them to? They are 28, 23, and 6. So 5 games above 500. Right now, they sit 4 points back of a playoff spot. And that playoff spot would be Vegas. Oh, no, Vegas is 68. I can't read. They're 4 points back of a playoff spot, which would be the Nashville Predators, who have 66 points, 2 games in hand as well. That's the thing, right? We are talking about a playoff spot that a bunch of teams are up for grabs for, right? The Oilers are trying to get in. The Ducks are trying to get in. The Canucks are trying to get in. The Predators are trying to get in. The Stars as well, right? There's a bunch of teams basically competing for 2 spots, and that's why the odds don't look so good. As of this morning, which is the obviously when things update, and I think Money Puck updates a little more often, and I bet if I go to their website right now, it might be updated. Let me see. It says 11:17 Eastern, so it hasn't updated since that Edmonton loss from today. the Canucks were at 14% from the Athletic, and they're at 24% from Money Puck, which sounds about right. I think Money Puck weights recency a little bit more heavily, which helps the Canucks a little bit because they have been better recently, while the Athletic is more of a 3-year weighted model by player. But I mean, I look at those numbers and I'm not like, oh, that's not good enough, right? Like, oh, that's unrealistic. I mean, you look at the teams they have to catch up to, right? The Oilers look like they're within reach. Catching the Oilers isn't enough right now, right? Because they also need to pass one of the other teams that's actually in a playoff spot, because the Oilers aren't right now. Dallas is in a playoff spot and they are on an absolute tear. With Robertson, who is unreal, back-to-back hat tricks. And then the Predators are on a bit of a heater right now. They're not on a heater right now, but they're still in it. Vegas is falling apart, but again, I'm not going to bet on Vegas falling out of the playoffs. That seems a little bit crazy. So the Canucks need something good to happen. They have a 7-game home stretch coming up, but not easy teams, right? And the first one, we're going to get to this, but I mean, they got teams like Montreal, who's not good, but they've beaten a bunch of good teams lately. And when we're talking about playoff chances, and with the trade deadline being 2 weeks away, we start to get into territory. It's crunch time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many games do the Canucks have before the deadline? Is it like
7? They have
all 7?
They have the 7 games. Yeah.
7. Yeah. And that 7th one's kind of iffy because that's like 16 hours before the deadline or something. But yeah, it really comes down to this, right? All season, or at least since January, February, we have been saying, well, this next stretch of games will decide what happens. And the Canucks always just seem to do slightly better than average. And it just keeps them alive, and it gets them a little bit closer. Like, well, if they kept that pace up, they'll get in. But there's no way they keep that pace up. And then they do a little bit more. They're not going crazy. They get a couple streaks here and there, and they've won 5 of their last 6, which is fantastic. But they need to continue it, right? And now this is it, right? 7 games to go before the trade deadline, with some expiring contracts. Guys like Boeser is the big one. Tyler Mott is on the table here. I mean, this is your chance to make your final say.
Wow.
What spot do you think the Canucks are in 7 games from now?
Great questions, Parker. And let's just break this down a tiny bit more. Sure, they're gaining a point on teams every week, but they're not gaining on all 5 teams that they're chasing, because Dallas, as you said, is really hot. Right before that, Nashville or St. Louis are. So what's crazy is we sit there, we look at them and say they have 62 points in 57 games. That says, okay, to get to 94, they need 32 points in 25. Throw in 2 extra time losses. I have them going, they need to go 15-8-2. 15-8-2 gets you 32 points in 25 games. That sounds reasonable, 15-8-2. But then when you look at 94 points, Parker, if you look at the wildcard teams right now, they're actually playing a 600 points percentage. So that's 98 points. So maybe this 94, 95 point barrier that we've been talking about might actually be 97 or 98 points. And if that's the case, the Canucks got to win 2 more games. So I'm making the point, I'm agreeing with you, that it's simply harder than it's one thing that we've won 5 out of 6. We have 7 games at home, but we might do super well, and we might only move 1 or 2 points, relatively speaking, against teams that still have 1 or 2 games in hand. That's why I guess that's what the graphic says, 14 to 24%.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the teams around them, right? Like LA seemed like, if any team was going to drop off, LA seemed like they might be a decent bet, right? Because they haven't been great lately. They've seemed to be sort of at the tail end of their run, and sort of the start of a rebuild, but they've won 8 of their last 10. They have been absolutely fantastic. They got a big win. I think earlier today they played, didn't they?
Yeah, they beat Boston.
They beat Boston. They were down with 30 seconds to go. They tie it up and win in overtime, right? They steal 2 points, and that's a hindrance to the Canucks, right? Instead of being 7 points back, and now they're 9. That's getting to unreachable territory, right? They'd have to really fall apart. Again, Vegas, they've won 4 of their last 10. They've been struggling a lot lately, especially they don't have Mark Stone in the lineup now. But it's Vegas. I have so much trouble being like, oh yeah, they're going to fall. They're going to keep falling, right? The Canucks will catch them. I mean, they've been one of the best teams in the league for their entire existence, which isn't that long, but still their history is pretty good. And we can say, yeah, the Oilers are going to fall and the Ducks are going to fall. And those seem to be pretty decent bets, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to bet on anyone to fall, that makes sense. But now you have Dallas going on this run.
Yes.
So the Canucks are basically, they need to leapfrog Anaheim,
Yep.
Edmonton,
Yep.
and Nashville,
Correct.
basically, to get in. Actually, wait, no, that's still not enough, is it? Oh no, that would be
No,
enough
they can
because
do
that would
that.
get them the last spot.
Yes.
Um, but I mean, even then, right? That's relying on 3 teams you have to beat. Either that, or you have to leapfrog Anaheim, Edmonton, and Vegas.
Vegas. Yeah.
And I think Nashville's probably an easier bet. But
Yeah.
Nashville's got not the they've got some tough opponents coming up, so we
Mhm.
could see them fall down a little bit. But again, the Canucks are going to have to win games. They
Yes.
they are going to have to make their own fate here if they're going to want any chance. And like you said, if that bar creeps up, if it's not 94, 95, if it's 97 points,
Yep.
um, then that's really tough, right? Because we're
Yeah.
talking about a team that is 5 points ahead of 500 right now, and we're talking about one that would need to get to 15, right?
Yeah,
That is
that's a
a
great point.
big
That's a
jump.
great point. Yes. And I know we've talked, Parker, before. Remember when the Central Division got off to a really hot start and all the Pacific teams except for I think it was Vegas kind of sucked in Edmonton at the start of the year. And we were saying, oh, 5 teams from the Central are going to make it. So the Canucks need to actually get to third place in the Pacific. Now, when you look at it, Minnesota, Dallas, Nashville are all within a point of each other, 66 and 67 points. So we can return our conversation as we've been doing for the last 5 minutes to the fact that they don't necessarily have to get to third in the Pacific, although that guarantees you they can, if one of Minnesota, Dallas, or Nashville fall off, and my money is on Nashville just like yours, we still have to, pass Anaheim, Edmonton, and Nashville and keep, so not impossible, but I still think not probable. I really do.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about it right now, the Canucks are basically what 11th in the
Yeah.
conference,
Yeah.
right? They got to jump. They got to jump over 3 teams.
Yeah.
It's really that simple, right? They got
Yeah.
to get from 11th to 8th. And I don't know how much they play a lot of these teams. I don't think they really play. They play the Stars
Yeah. The big one
twice,
is we didn't talk
but
about it, but
that's
Vegas. Yeah, they played them 3 times, but we're not really have our sights on Vegas right now. Yeah.
yeah. And again, we don't. But if the Canucks were to win all 3 of those,
Yeah.
then that would be in the
Yeah.
cards, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, they've historically struggled badly against Vegas.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels unlikely. And what's worrying to me is really, where is this team, 13 days from now, right?
Mm-hmm.
7 more games.
Mm-hmm.
My fear is they go 4-2-1.
Yeah.
They are maybe a little bit closer. Maybe they're 3 points out, but they're trending up. I mean, what do you do, right? Do you say, well, you guys have earned a shot, or do
Yeah.
you say you had a shot, you got close, but you're still not close enough for us to not make these moves, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, then you're starting to have to make decisions like guys like Brock Boeser and
Yes.
potentially JT Miller, who's fallen sort of out of the talks a little bit, and
Yeah.
Tyler Mott is in my opinion probably the most the most obvious trade chip, right?
Yeah.
UFA, really valuable for the playoffs. You completely lose him after this year if you don't do anything. Contract rumors that seem really high. He seems to be sort of a key piece. So if they're just sort of still hovering around, like if they lose 4 of the next 7, then we
Mhm.
start to get into that territory of like, hey, the odds just get a little bit lower. Now you're down like sub 10% and you
Yeah.
make those moves. But yeah, you win 4 of them and you're probably around 20%, 25%, maybe 30%. You're starting to think, okay, well, do we hold out for a 30% chance and potentially mortgage the future a little bit, even though you're maybe because not making moves is the same as making moves, right? It's the same as
Yeah.
basically acquiring rentals if you're not selling your rentals. Yeah, it's a weird spot to be in.
And I love the point, Parker, you make about the trade talk simmering down, because if we were to go back exactly 4 weeks ago to our February 7th show, I'm pretty sure we talked about Miller, Boeser, Horvat, Garland, Mott. And now you're right. Whether it's Frank Saravelli or others saying that trade talks have died down because this management team wants to give this team, this current crop of players, a chance to see what they can do. But you're right. Finally, with the trade deadline 2 weeks from today, that window is actually going to close to make decisions. So Do you want to keep Miller around? If so, fine. Do you want to keep Horvat? You don't even really have to worry about Boeser. Are you going to risk negotiating? That's fine. So you're right. That leaves you with actually 2 UFAs, but Halak's basically unmovable, as we talked about last week. So then you're looking at Tyler Mott. And are you recouping a draft pick or someone just so you don't lose him, like i.e. Hamus and Verbata from a few summers ago?
Yeah, so Tyler Mott is the big one here, right? So there was rumors floating around. Don't remember who said them because I sort of remembered it from a couple days ago, but
Yeah.
comparable name floated around was Sean Corrali. And the floated contract was 4 years at 2.5 million, which I think would take Tyler Mott to being 31. I think he's 26 right now. It would kick in next season. His birthday's in 3 days. So it would be his age 30, 31 season, I think.
Yeah.
2.5 million is a lot for a fourth liner because that is what Tyler Mott is. And he's one of the best fourth liners in the league. And we can talk about that all we want. But the numbers don't lie, right? He has 7 goals this year, which is great. But he's not going to be more than a fourth liner. 2.5 million is a lot, right? And 4 years is a lot as well, because if you think Tyler Mott is at this level, I think this Tyler Mott we're getting right now, I think is right on the edge of being worth 2.5 million.
Okay.
The problem is the risk factor, right? Do I think he gets higher than that? No. So there's really no upside to the salary level on the contract, right? The only real reasonable thing is either it stays there, which is best case, and I think that makes the contract decent, or he falls off a bit and suddenly you're getting negative value, right?
Yeah.
And I think falling off a bit for a fourth liner, the problem there is suddenly you're not in the lineup anymore.
Yes.
If 2 years from now, fourth liners don't last that long, right? You got new guys coming in, whether it's guys like, the Canucks don't have a lot of prospects coming up, but maybe you do have someone. Maybe you go out and you sign 16 more fourth line free agents on the first day of free agency, and you find a guy like Matthew Highmore, who for 1 million can slot into that spot, and you use that 1.5 million elsewhere. Maybe to pay for the goalies you have to pay for next year that aren't playing for the team. So it's really tricky. And the problem is, do you say, well, if we think we have a run here, if we think we want to make a run at the playoffs, what are you giving up to do that? Because what do you get back for Tyler Mott? I genuinely don't know. Do you have any idea?
If I said to you, second round pick, what does that say? That's reasonable, right?
So we're saying if we wanted to make a run at the playoffs for this year, for the last, there's 7 games before the trade deadline. The Canucks have played 57 games, so it'll be 64. So for the last 18 games of the season, is 18 games of Tyler Mott for a maybe a 25% chance of the playoffs worth a second round pick?
Yeah.
And that's the question you have to do. You have to ask, right? And we talk about asset management and being the big indictment of the old regime, really, right? Part of me said, part of me wants to be like, let's just go. Let's just have some fun, right? Screw the second round pick. That's not going to be anything. Let's hope for some playoff games, get some interesting stuff down the stretch. But in reality, what does a fourth liner really give you, right? In those 18 games. Does that even cost you 1 game? Maybe, right? Maybe it's a 2-point difference. Okay, is 2 points in the standings worth a second round pick this year? Right. And then that's when you start to get into the things of like, okay, well, I'm kind of wanting the lottery ticket, right? And again, I think all of this comes down to, I think this is a rumored number, this 4 at 2.5. I think they should be having these conversations with everybody at this point. I know you can't negotiate with JT Miller yet, but you should be saying, hey, when we get to next offseason, if we do want to extend you, what do you think that will look like? Because if we think we're going to extend you, then we're not even going to try to trade you because then it's worth keeping you. The same with Brock Boeser, who we'll get to. If you think if you think the extension's reasonable, then the trade talks don't matter. And with Tyler Mott, if we're talking 3 years at $2 million, or like 1.8, 1.9, right? Then maybe you're starting to say, okay, well then, yeah, we'll just keep you, right? And then this is all moot. And I think that is, the thing that we don't have the inside knowledge on. We get some of the news through Twitter and things like that, but yeah, it's a weird spot to be in.
Yeah, Parker, can you put up Kai's comment, just 3 from the bottom? Because that's exactly what I'm thinking. As soon as I saw your graphic that had a 2 at the start of Mott's
Too
salary,
scary.
I didn't like it. I do 175, I do 18, I might even do 19 depending on the term. But as soon as I saw the 2, especially when you consider his line mates, Lamico making 750, Highmore 725. So you're getting those two guys for
Find those
1.4
out there.
Yeah, and exactly. With all due respect to Tyler Mott, you can find another guy who could probably do it for $1 million, which is what Highmore and Lamico will likely each make next year, right? We talked about this, a 1 or 2 year contract, a bit of a bump. It's a 25% raise, which is pretty good. I'd take a 25% raise if they get to 1 million. So overall, or 33% raise, overall, I think I think it doesn't make sense, and therefore I'm with you. I would capitalize on moving him for anything, knowing that you guys have Lockwood, maybe Klimovich, maybe a couple years away. There's still Di Giuseppe or Rempel, all these guys that kind of want a shot and we're trying to get a shot. I think, and don't forget, Dickinson's still got to come back too. So if you're okay with Chase on the lineup, there's your top 12 right there. I know they're not the same as Mott, but I'm saying we have options if we do move him.
Yeah, and again, it's all, if we're talking about a team that's trying to make the playoffs next year, right?
Yeah.
And a team that's maybe competing in 2 or 3, if we're talking about a 4-year contract at $2.5 million, well, that's eating into that cap in your Stanley Cup contention window that you're trying to put together, right?
Yeah.
If it's 1 year, 2 years, you can get out of it, right? You can trade him if it's not working out, right? And even if you get nothing for him, that's fine. You can probably trade him.
Yeah.
So right now, the Athletic does these player cards, right, where they give you a market value on a player. Tyler Mott's market value right now, at least per this, based on his performance and his impact, is 2.7 million, and that's just based on the way he's playing this year, which is great. But it's the best he's had, right? He's playing above his projected in every single category, basically, except for goals. So that's the tricky part. Do you think he maintains this? Is this who Tyler Mott is? Then maybe he's worth it. Especially since this 4th line is playing 3rd line minutes. But the odds are against that. So, and again, you can go get a bunch of guys for $1 million and their salary cap doesn't matter unless they're on the roster, right? If they just go to the 50 contract limit, you can have 20 guys making $1 million in the AHL, and they don't count on the cap. So that's, if you can try to find replacements, there's going to be a lot of guys out there like that in free agency. They might not be Tyler Mott level, but they might be half the price.
Right. Yep. I think we're on the same page. Should we talk about Mott's line mate, and in particular who that line mate got traded for?
Sure. Yeah. So, well, I guess we'll go to this. Juho Lammikko, that was a good trade. Hey,
This looks good to me.
Yeah. So, Olli Juolevi, waived by the Florida Panthers. Now, here's the thing: the Florida Panthers are a better team than the Vancouver Canucks, right?
Yeah.
The Vancouver Canucks don't have a great defense. To the point where Juolevi was close to making this roster, except if it wasn't for that bag skate performance, I think. So we're talking about, it's not that big of a surprise that he got waived. How many games did he play this year for Florida? 10?
10. Yeah.
10 games this year. He had a grand total of 0 points. He was a +0, and he had 2 penalty minutes. So he literally 0 impact is what we're talking about here, right? They waive him. They lose nothing. Detroit picks him up. And Florida now has nothing from that trade. And I think if they hadn't made that trade, they probably still would have nothing. I think Lammikko would have got sent down, and Juleson, I think, wasn't waiver eligible anyways. But I mean, the Canucks got something from nothing. And Olli Juolevi, a 1st-round pick just a handful of years ago, has literally 0 value at this point. And I got some heat I didn't get heat, but I my hot take last week was Halak wouldn't play another NHL game. I don't know if Juolevi plays another NHL game. I guess maybe for Detroit, he might play a couple, but
Sure.
I mean, I think he's probably not going to play another 50, right? He's only ever played 36. Is that right?
33, 23 with us, and
I don't know what this is telling me then.
Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, he's on pace for this year 30. I don't know. It's trying to do Elite Prospects is trying to do math for me. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about a guy who might not hit 50 games in his career, from a fifth overall pick, which is kind of wild. But look, he got screwed up by injuries, right? Yeah. He had a couple of really bad injuries before he played an NHL game, and he just couldn't keep up, right? We saw him get turnstiled early in the season, preseason, things like that. Things that have happened to some guys on the current roster. But yeah, he doesn't have the legs for the game. Hopefully he can get something going in Detroit, some sort of a bounce back, but seems to be the end of the Olli Juolevi saga.
Yes, I vlogged about this extensively today, so I won't rehash it, but I'll say a couple things real quick, Parker. Back in 2016, when we drafted him, we knew Austin Matthews was consensus number 1. Then it went Laine. Then it went Dubois, and I got excited that Puljujarvi might slip to the Canucks at 5, but no, Edmonton takes him. And then we're sitting there, and we knew, and let's be honest, it was Juolevi or Mikhail Sergachev were the 2 defensemen, and then you had a Matthew Tkachuk sitting there. So we know the history. We take Juolevi, Tkachuk and Keller go 6 and 7. Then Sergachev goes 9. There's a Charlie McAvoy down in the teens. There's a Samuel Girard in there. There's like some really Alex DeBrincat's in the 30s. So there's some good players. We don't have to revisit all of them, but you're right. Then I was really, really one of the proponents for him. Oh, defensemen take a long time, despite Sergachev having 2 cups. You give him some time, he'll be fine. Then he plays 1 game in the playoff bubble. And then he has a decent preseason to start of last season.
By the way, that playoff game, he looked okay.
Yeah, he was fine. And then he plays 23 games, but lost a spot to Rathbone and others on the left side. And then you're right, had a not so good training camp this season. And then I can't remember when he got traded, but obviously near the start of the season because we've had Lammikko.
It was October 10th or 11th.
So right at the start. And Juleson, who knows? Maybe we don't know what he's going to be. But even if you went Lammikko straight up for your levy, look at Lammikko. He's improved. We talked about this last week. He's improved so much in his time here. And yes, we're not trying to dunk on anyone else or because I want Juolevi. I wanted him to work out. But it's just kind of maddening because in that 4-year window of drafting, it was great. Boeser in 15, Patey in 2017, Hughes in 2018, the 1 black mark. 2016, you're sitting there with an Olli Juolevi.
Yep, it was a miss.
Yeah,
and it happens. And the fact that they got a decent player out of it in Lammikko, John Pond. I don't know how long Lammikko lasts, right? I mean, he's what? Is he 26?
Is he that old already? Wow.
I don't know. I'm guessing. I'm not a journalist. He's 26. Yeah.
Oh, very good.
So I mean, even if they get a couple good years out of him for cheap, they're in a pretty good spot. Yeah, that's all I got to say on that one. Speaking of defensemen, I don't want to be mean. Tucker Pullman.
What were you going to say, Parker?
I was going to say, speaking of not very good defensemen, speaking of 4 years at $2.5 million, Tucker Pullman. Back at practice, missed 6 weeks. Gonna be honest.
Wow.
Didn't really notice.
No, when you say 6, that that didn't seem like that long.
So there was a picture, I think the Canucks Twitter posted, like, look who's back. And it was like a picture of his face. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, I don't know who that is. There's no context. I genuinely don't know who that is. I had to go to like the replies. I was like, oh, it's Pullman. And then something said like 6 weeks he'd been out for. I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know he'd been gone for that long. I didn't notice. But he's back at practice.
Yep, he is. And wasn't skating on one of the top 3 pairs yet because this is his first game. He's skating on the extra pair with Madison Bowey. This is interesting because do you bring him in, Parker? Because you're not bringing him for Myers, obviously, because Myers plays top minutes with OEL. Schenn is being a bit of a revelation, as you and I both have talked about this season, and Hamonic is starting to find his game. In fact, 2 points yesterday, the highest scoring defenseman for the Canucks. So on Saturday. So what do? Where do you put him? Do you bring him in?
To be fair, Hamonic did have that pinch on the penalty kill.
Yeah, that was not nice. Yeah, that's true.
He did make up for it though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. Right?
Yeah.
They're doing fine. Pullman was a good sort of fill-in for Hamonic. I say good. He was a fine, that whole gap filler for Hamonic. Hamonic's back now, and it's not like Hamonic's great, but he's been fine.
Yeah.
He's had his off performances and his off plays, but I think at this point I don't see why you do make that change, right? We're talking about a team that's won 5 of their last 6, 7 of their last 9, right? A team that's heating up when they need to. I don't think you change anything up.
Have you ever seen Luke Schenn play the other side? I'm not being sarcastic. I'm asking because that's the only thing I would consider doing is moving Hunt out. Although Hunt's been fine, and then trying Schenn on the third pairing. But
I think my only problem with Hunt is lack of foot speed, and I don't know if Tucker Pullman solves that really.
Yeah. That's
fair. I don't think he's not like a great skater. And my other problem with Hunt is that he plays on the power play still, and that bugs me. But yeah, no, I don't see anything being changed yet.
Okay, I'm with you.
All
so
right,
just with
else?
Pullman skating, then it's just Dickinson as our only regular who's not, and et cetera, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What else do we have on our list? Do you want to talk about Boeser at all? Trade talk. He's like the number 1 name now.
Yeah.
But I think, so we've just a quick rehash. $7.5 million qualifying offer. If the Canucks want to extend him, they have to make him that offer, and he has to choose whether or not to accept it. But once he is qualified, he is still an RFA, and the Canucks can also, sign him to a different deal for this entire process, right? They can say, hey, we know we can give you 1 by 7.5 on July 1 or July 20 or whatever it ends up being this year. But hey, do you want 6 by 6 or something, right? And try to do something earlier. And again, I think this is a conversation that they're probably having now, right? They're probably having these conversations with Boeser's camp, and they're saying, okay, well, are you going to end up taking that 7.5 if we offer it to you? And if that is the case, then maybe they are thinking, something along the trade line. Maybe they aren't. Maybe they're thinking that doesn't fit into their cap picture next year. Or maybe they are saying, yeah, well, we're, let's talk an extension, right? Let's talk about something in the 4 or 5 year range and get Boeser locked up long term. And then you put those trade talks on the back burner. The problem with things like this is kind of want to have it locked in the next 2 weeks, right? You don't want to get caught going like, we're going to do something like 4 years, and then trade deadline passes and they change their mind. And they're like, actually, we want the 7.5 mil because we think Boeser is going to be really good and we think he's going to be able to get more money. So most of the stuff, you want it locked in the next 2 weeks. So I don't know if that means that we get some sort of action. Apparently lots of teams have been calling on Boeser. And I mean, if we talk about what Brock Boeser is, right? He's a 30 goal scorer, a fairly smart player who had that one terrible pass up the middle yesterday or on Saturday. But that's fine. One mistake, who is, part of a core that hasn't really done anything at this point.
Yeah, it really depends on, obviously figuratively speaking, what side, or metaphorically speaking, what side of the bed I get up on, because he's 24 years old. He still could be our best pure goal scorer. He's got a great hockey IQ. He's underrated defensively, all these good things. But then I've always said the one thing that he can't do is pass. He's a very, I don't think he's a bit. And actually, I know you didn't get to see the game, Parker. He actually had a really bad giveaway in the Islanders game too. So that's back-to-back games with giveaways. Nobody's perfect, but he's a little bit streaky too. He'll score in bunches and then he'll kind of be invisible for a little bit. So, but unlike Miller, he's actually said that he wants to stay in Vancouver. Horvat has said he wants to stay in Vancouver, whereas Miller's just going to say, I will worry about the future when the future comes. So I don't know. I could make an argument either way. I do know one thing. There's no pressure. Even though he's club controlled, Boeser technically has all the leverage because he doesn't have to sign anything. He can just I don't want to talk. Just give me 7.5 and let's see how I do next season.
Yeah, so I'm gonna defer back to the sort of athletic stats because I just find them fascinating.
Yeah.
Um, he's on pace for 25 goals, 25 assists, 50
Mhm.
points. It's not great, but we know that he started a little slow and he's got, like everyone did on the team, right? He's got 30-30 potential, right? And by potential, I mean that should be a normal year for him. Um, so they use this metric that's GSVA. It's like game
Mm.
score versus average or something. Offense, he was projected at being basically zero value, which is like league average. He's at minus 13 this year, which is bad, right? That's like worth negative 13 points. Defensively, he's at a positive 10.5, which is in the top, like he's in like 78th percentile, just looking at the, like eyeballing the graph.
Hmm.
And he ends up being kind of average. And his market value, at least per this, is $6.8 million,
Okay.
which is close to 7.5.
Yeah.
So that takes me to, okay, well, 7.5 doesn't seem like that crazy of a number then, if you think Besser's going to be better next year. It also, similar to what I was talking about with Tyler Mott, doesn't leave a lot of room for upside, right?
No.
You're not going to be looking at that like as a high value contract, um, next year at all. Or if it's an extension around 7 or whatever it ends up being, you're not going to be talking about how, oh, the Canucks have a steal unless he's scoring 40, 45 goals, which I don't think is going to happen. It might happen once, right? He might
Yeah.
have one breakout year, something like that. But it seems unlikely. So I don't want them to trade Besser. And
Yeah.
I pretty much stand by that because I don't think you're going to do much better with
Right.
whatever you get. And he's still in that age group where you're not running out of time, right? Besser's still going to be a good player for the next 6 years, right?
Mhm.
Maybe longer. And that was sort of earlier why I was on sort of the trade JT Miller side. Like, well, he's probably only, if we're talking about 30 being the start of the downfall, that's only a couple years away.
Mm.
Have I changed my tune on that? Maybe, but I don't have to talk about it much anymore because Miller's name is falling down trade lists. So yeah, it's I would be sad to see them trade Besser. I think he's a really crucial part of the room and sort of the identity of this team. My and then where I sort of bounce back on that is, have I fallen for an identity of like a team in which the identity is not like, it's a nice identity, but they've been losing, right?
Yeah.
Like this core hasn't done anything. And
Yeah.
and again, have they have the pieces to do something and the coaching to do something? Maybe not. But something's going to have to change. I think if you come back next year with the exact same roster, something might happen, but something might not as well, right? You might just run into a wall and waste another year. So I'm really wishy-washy on this one.
The numbers are so tough, Parker, when you say, even if you say Besser at 7. So for next season, at least Miller's locked in for 5.25 and Horvat's locked in for 5.8 or whatever you make. So at least it's 11 million between Miller and Horvat. And let's say you get Besser let's say he just takes a qualifying offer. That's still 18 and a half between those three guys, and massive contracts for PD, Hughes, Ekman Larson, Myers, Demko. And some of those guys earn it for sure. But if you go to the next season and you're trying to extend Miller, he's going to want 7 to 8. Horvat's going to want 7. Besser's 7. So that's 3 guys that making between 21 and 24, plus all those guys I just talked about with heavy contracts. You're going to have to be very, very smart around the edges. And maybe Alvin and Rutherford, as his running buddy, can do that. We just haven't seen that type of roster management in the last 8 years. So maybe that's good and bad. Like we can't say that Alvin can't do it, but we don't know what it's like to fill up the roster really well along the edges is my point.
Yep. And there's nothing we can do about it. We get to just enjoy the ride and see what happens. And hopefully things work out, but we won't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what we do know is that we will have a show on the night of the trade deadline, March 21st.
That's going to be massive.
Because it is a Monday, and that's going to be a fun one. So make sure you're subscribed for that, and make sure you've liked this stream as well while you are here. We do have about 10 minutes left, but I do want to give a little reminder that this show is up on your favorite podcast platform as well. And if you give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, we do appreciate it. I think someone gave us our first 1-star review a couple months ago, actually, and I missed
Oh,
it, and I wanted to read it out because I thought it was funny. Basically, I just want to read the headline. The headline is "My ears are bleeding." I think it's hard. I think we have good audio quality. So it was a little sad to see that, but
what else did they
there's a
say?
5-star review to balance that one out.
Okay. Okay. My ears are bleeding. Well, maybe he should just turn down his thing.
Yeah, that might be it too.
Okay.
It was because it was before we had the nice background music at the start. That's the key.
Okay.
Um,
Well, we're
do we
big
want
boys.
to
We can take it. Yeah.
do we want to do a mini preview of this week, or do we want to get to questions?
Let's do this very quickly because yes, there's 3 games before we get together again. Montreal, Washington, and Tampa. What do you say? Just give me a record, and then we'll do questions for a few minutes.
Triple ones.
Yeah.
But that's lame. 3-0. I don't know. I think they have like I said, Montreal right now is one of the hottest teams in the NHL, which is weird to say.
Mm.
But they've been on a bit of a streak here. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've won their last 2, and they beat the Flames, one of the best teams in the NHL right now. They beat the Oilers. They beat the Maple Leafs just a week ago. They beat the St. Louis Blues. They beat the Islanders, who the Canucks just beat. So they've beat some good teams the last couple of weeks, and that's going to be a test. It's a game the Canucks need to win. It's one of those teams that the Canucks need to come out strong. They're coming off of a big rest, like a 4-day break. Come out, win that game, move on.
Yep. Yes, I think they'll beat Montreal despite how good Montreal is playing. I actually think the Canucks may lose Washington because I want them to beat Tampa. That's Gail's birthday, and I think it'd be a great birthday gift for her. And I'm excited to see them play against the Stanley Cup champions. So I'll go 2-1. I just don't know if it's the Washington or Tampa that they lose, but they got to beat Montreal. You have to win those games. You absolutely have to.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So yeah, like we said, they play Wednesday against Montreal, Friday against Washington, Sunday against Tampa, and I think they play Tuesday or something after that. But we'll be here between that, so you don't have to worry.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to your comments, your questions. Some predictions coming through, some 3-0s, some 2 out of 3s.
Ivan's very nice. He says the one who gave us a 1-star, that person is probably a Leafs fan. You guys are top class. Enjoy both your commentary. Thank you, Ivan. We appreciate
Thanks,
that.
Ivan.
Yeah.
All right. What sort of comments, questions do we have here? I'm going to scroll up the list. Have you been reading the comments much? I haven't. I only have one screen in front of me today.
Oh, yeah. I have 2 screens, but neither of them do I read the comments.
You guys are yelling into the void sometimes.
No. We'll find some good ones. How far are you scrolling up?
I'm back about 10 minutes.
There was a lot of talk about a lot of puns about Brock Boeser, Brock Lesnar needing a manager, Paul Heyman, a bunch of wrestling stuff. Yeah,
that all goes right over my head.
So if you want to talk about wrestling, you can. Subscribers, viewers, just know that I'll be the one appreciating it, not Parker, because he's actually the mature one of the two of us. But you guys knew that already.
Yeah. There was some talk about Mott earlier. Kai earlier said you shouldn't be paying a bottom 6 forward. I think this is the one we read, but he also mentioned at the end that you have guys like Lockwood coming up, which I don't think we touched on. That's, I don't know how good Lockwood is defensively, but that is an interesting one. Shiraz, is there anything preventing the team from calling up Spencer Martin other than faith that Halak would play better? To my knowledge, no. I don't think you'd have to go through waivers on the way back. I think it's genuine them thinking that Halak, this is an iffy segment for him. He probably plays the game on next Sunday before the trade deadline. Maybe gets traded. Maybe I don't see it. But yeah, it's they could absolutely play him if they wanted to.
And you made a great point last week, Parker. You said, it's very easy to bring up Martin because of obviously it's Abbotsford, it's not Utica. It's so close. And
it's a 7-game homestand right now.
Yeah, exactly. And what happens? Gosh, what happens if who knows? Let's worry about it next week. I'm just thinking if Demko plays all 6, they beat Calgary on Saturday night, the 19th, and then you're staring down the barrel of a back-to-back at home on the 20th, the day before the trade deadline.
RP88 asks, and I'll let you take this one first. Name one thing. What's your key to the game? and he says to secure a win next game, but I'm talking about, let's say for the next 3 games, these 3 games, let's say the Canucks want to get 5 or 6 points out of them. What do they need to do? What is your key to their success right now?
I'll say 2 things. A good start, not getting blitzed in the first period that we saw against Anaheim at home. We saw against the Islanders at home. So that scares me. Those 2 games, they got blitzed and they were at home. So I'd say a good start for sure. And especially against Montreal and even Washington, you're going to have a lot of fans cheering for the opposing team. Not a majority, but certainly the Montreal game, we know there's going to be a great energy in there. So a good start, score an early goal, kind of shut those fans down a little bit like we did against Toronto. The other thing, and we talked about it, Parker, right at the start, was stay out of the penalty box because our penalty kill, although improving, is still almost historically bad levels. Why give teams that opportunity to capitalize? So keep your feet moving, stay out of the box, no stupid penalties, no lazy penalties. And that's when they do that, they do really well.
Yeah, I think my biggest one was staying out of the penalty box for sure. We've tried to say the penalty kill needs to be better. It's not going to happen. So they need to just not be on the penalty kill. That's the biggest thing. But really, for me, it's keep scoring goals, right? Like we're talking about a couple of teams. I mean, Montreal's goaltending is a bit of a question mark still, right? They still don't have Carey Price, obviously. But when we're talking about Washington, they have a pretty solid goalie. We're talking about Tampa Bay; they have a very solid goalie. When the Canucks score 3 goals, they win most of the time because they have Thatcher Demko back there. Now, I think my biggest key in that case is to get some pucks away from Demko. He is facing so much and he's starting to look tired. And like they're pointing out of the broadcast that like he's like hunched over at times. And I don't know if he's maybe got something nagging him or if it's or if he's just exhausted. It genuinely could be either. But if this team can't rely on putting in Halak every once in a while, they need to get Demko less shots on net. Just some more rest. And that's going to be tough against Tampa Bay. But a team like Montreal, it means you just have to be dominant. And that's something this team obviously struggles with. But Demko could use a night off and you can go put up like 6 on Montreal, then he doesn't have to try that hard. And I don't know. It's a tall ask, but it would be nice.
Related to that, if you scroll all the way to the new comments, Park, at the very bottom, see edit says, how many more starts do you give to Halak by the end of March? Would you just ride Demko all 7 home games?
No, you can't. You can't play him. What defines this to me, they didn't do it last time, right? They had the best chance possible on the back-to-back to run your goalie again when the Rangers and the Devils, and they didn't do it, right? Because they had a nice gap before, a nice gap after, and they didn't do it. They're not going to do it this time. And their only back-to-back is the 19th and the 20th. Actually, no, they have back-to-back right after that. They've got the 19th and 20th and 23rd, 24th. I think Halak gets 2 of those games unless you do something like trade Halak and then it's Spencer Martin, which I think is reasonable, right? You know, if other teams think that Halak's just having a weird thing right now and a team like Toronto is saying, okay, we need some sort of secondary option, then yeah, we're talking about Spencer Martin at that point. But they're not going to ride Demko the whole way because I just don't think he can handle it.
That's fair. I agree with you. And I like Jeremy's question. What new lines implemented by Boudreau that surprised you? So I'll give you a couple. I was intrigued by the the Pettersson, Podkolzin, and Höglander line because they all play the same way, or at least they think the same way. But it was very clear that Boudreau did not trust that line in heavy situations, especially with the 2 young guys. So I did like Podkolzin, Pettersson, Garland, PPG. I thought that was intriguing. Miller, Boeser, Pearson has worked out really well, especially how heavy they play. And the 4th line was a bit of a no-brainer because you can't really play any of those guys up any higher. So I think Boudreau, I don't mind how often he changes. It's not like drastic. I don't know why he's doing these scratch your head changes. He's still looking for chemistry. And I don't mind the way that he composes his lines.
Yeah, there's usually some sort of method to it, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's just keeping the 4th line together and then trying some different combinations that seem to be rooted in like, okay, this is going to be a line that is hard-nosed and fast. And this is going to be a line that's maybe a bit slower, but is going to try to set up in the offensive zone. And
Yes.
sometimes it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, they get changed up. But we're not seeing things go in the blender 3 minutes into the game like we did in the past.
Yeah.
There seems to be some chemistry building, right, between guys like Pedersen and Podkolzin, right? And I think they've been working together okay. Höglander is kind of stuck on the outside, and I don't love that, but it's working, so it's hard for me to criticize. So yeah, it's I haven't been upset with line combinations. It's hard to be when the team's been actually successful.
Yep. Ditto.
I think we'll take one more.
All right.
And I think I want to go with C edits because there's been sort of a lot of discourse around this week. Around Horvat as a captain and around JT Miller. I want you to start this one.
I'm fine with Miller being more outspoken. I'm fine with him being an acknowledged, if not the acknowledged leader. And I'm also fine with all that happening with Horvat wearing the C. I really am. I think you can never have enough guys with leadership. And if Horvat doesn't care that there's another guy who's even a better leader helping him, and if Miller doesn't care that he's not the one wearing the C, to me, maybe I'm being naive, it's a non-issue.
I agree.
Wow.
I mean, you look at there was the apt comparison, the obvious comparison that I hadn't thought of, and then it got mentioned. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, right? And it's Henrik Sedin to Ryan Kessler, right? It's the Miller's more outspoken than Kessler was, but very similar levels of drive. And Kessler was sort of the lifeblood of that team at times, right? Where he was the guy who would just go on a run, put the team on his back. And the Sedins were just, or Henrik Sedin at least was just consistent, and he was quiet, at least outspokenly wise. But it worked, right? And I think, the captain, you look around the league, the captain isn't always the guy who's, yelling a lot and being the most energetic out there, right? I mean, lots of the people saying like, "Oh, Miller should be the captain," are the same people who get upset when Miller has these games where he looks lazy and he's just out there swearing and skating slowly to the bench, right? But because the team's winning right now, it's easy to look at the other side of it, and the fact that he has 17 points in his last 9 games obviously makes it easier.
Yeah.
And yeah, Horvat hasn't been playing great this year, but again, same with most of the team, right? At least up until December. Or even January when we're talking about some people. And yeah, I think, unless he's getting traded, they're not going to strip Horvat of the captaincy. I think that's absolutely absurd. So yeah, that's basically all I've got.
And it's funny, it just as a very quick aside, a lot of people have asked me, do you compare Miller to Kessler? And I said, aside from them being both American, both a bit snarly and both being centers, no, I think Kessler has a much better defensive game. I think Miller has more, no, Kessler had a really good offensive game too. I'm not going to downplay Kessler's offensive game. Miller is not as good defensively.
Right.
That's maybe the biggest
absolutely. Yeah. I'm not even talking about play style. I'm just talking about, they're the guy at times, right?
Yeah.
Where they'll go on runs where they'll just take over the league. And Kessler's obvious notorious example is Nashville, right? That Nashville series. And Miller is right now, right? Where he's seemingly just unstoppable. He scores every game. He's racking up points. And I don't think anything needs to be changed, really.
Very good. Very good.
All right. We're going to wrap up there, folks. Thank you guys for joining us. I hope you enjoyed. If you missed any part of it, like I said, you can find us on your favorite podcast platform, or you can rewind back to the beginning of this. You can find me at ParkersPucks on Twitter and YouTube, Clay at Canuck Clay on Twitter and YouTube. It's pretty easy. It's all linked in the description as well if you want to find us elsewhere. Clay, any parting words for the night?
Well, Parker, thank you for taking time out of your vacation to do this. I think it's a good show. I just saw the 1-star rating. I'm actually laughing. The guy's pretty funny, but I'm not too worried about it. And overall, let's keep it going. And I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen. The Canucks are going to win 4 or 5 of these 7 games, and they're going to be in the exact same spot exactly 2 weeks from now. But we'll worry about that then.
Yep. It is going to be interesting for sure. We'll be back here next Monday, 10 p.m. as usual. And the one after that, of course, is the trade deadline. You won't want to miss it. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you hit the like button. Do all that good stuff. And we will see you next time.